everybody, and welcome to this deep dive, into one of the most, enduring concepts in philosophy, I think.
Oh, yeah?
Aristotle's Eudaimonia.
Absolutely.
And we're going to be exploring excerpts from another podcast script that breaks down, the first part of his Nicomachean ethics. So
Yeah, and it's a text that still resonates thousands of years later and surprisingly, relevant for navigating the complexities of modern life. So
that's what we're going to unpack today. So what did Aristotle really mean by eudaimonia?
Right?
You'll often see it translated as happiness,
Yeah.
but our deep dive reveals it's so much more than just, fleeting good vibes.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's about flourishing, thriving.
Right.
It's a more holistic and enduring state of being.
Okay, so let's ditch the simple happiness translation. Our source emphasizes that eudaimonia is about living well, but what does that actually look like in practice?
Well, the script uses this vivid example that I love. Think about the difference between scarfing down a delicious burger
Oh, yeah.
and the feeling of building a family or contributing to your community.
Right.
The burger brings a burst of pleasure.
Sure.
Sure, but it's temporary.
Right, whereas those other things, they require, effort, patience, maybe even some struggle along the way.
Exactly, but they also tap into a deeper sense of purpose and fulfillment. That's what Aristotle is getting at with Eudaimonia.
So is he suggesting that we all become ascetics and swear off burgers?
Right.
There's got to be some middle ground here.
Yeah, he's not anti-pleasure, don't worry.
Okay.
But he's highlighting the crucial distinction between fleeting pleasure and the lasting fulfillment that comes from living virtuously.
There's that word virtue, central to Aristotle's whole philosophy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Our source material mentions this concept of the golden mean,
Yeah.
which sounds intriguing, but kind of abstract.
Yeah.
Can you break it down to us?
Yeah, the golden mean is all about finding balance. Aristotle believed that every virtue exists on a spectrum between two extremes,
Okay.
one of excess and one of deficiency.
Okay, so give us a concrete example. How does this golden mean play out in a real-world situation?
Let's take courage, for example.
Okay.
It's the version that lies between recklessness,
Uh-huh.
which is courage in excess, and cowardice, which is a deficiency of courage.
Okay.
A reckless person might jump into dangerous situations without thinking, while a coward might avoid any risk at all.
Right.
True courage, according to Aristotle, lies in finding that sweet spot.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's about finding that balanced, virtuous approach in every area of life.
Exactly.
How do we apply this golden mean principle to other virtues like generosity?
Generosity, according to Aristotle, would be the mean between stinginess and extravagance.
Okay.
A stingy person hoards their resources and is unwilling to share, while an extravagant person gives excessively, often to their own detriment.
Right.
True generosity lies in finding that balance between giving freely and responsibly.
So it seems like this golden mean idea is a powerful tool for navigating all sorts of ethical dilemmas. But how do we actually become more virtuous? It can't be just about knowing these concepts, right?
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
The script compares developing virtue to a musician practicing their instrument.
Uh-huh.
It takes consistent effort and action making virtuous choices until they become second nature.
So it's about cultivating these virtues through our everyday actions, like building a muscle. What if we mess up sometimes? Are we doomed?
Don't worry, it's a process.
Okay.
Aristotle recognized that we're all works in progress.
Right.
The key is to keep striving to keep making those choices that align with virtue.
That's reassuring, but sometimes it's hard to know what the right choice even is. How do we know we're applying these ethical principles correctly in the heat of the moment? Did Aristotle have any thoughts on that?
That's where things get really interesting. The script highlights Aristotle's concept of phronesis,
Okay.
often translated as practical wisdom. It's not just knowing the rules, it's knowing how to apply them wisely.
So how does phronesis work in practice? Can you give us like a concrete example?
Imagine you're a manager, and you have to let someone go.
Uh-huh.
It's the right decision for the company, but you also feel empathy for the employee. Phronesis is what helps you navigate that situation with both wisdom and compassion, finding the best way to deliver the news and support the employee through the transition.
Wow, that's a great example. Phronesis seems like it could be applied to all sorts of everyday situations. Parenting, for instance. You want to raise kind, responsible kids.
Right.
But sometimes you have to make tough calls, like do you let your child struggle with a problem or do you step in to help?
Exactly. Phronesis would guide you to consider the specific context, your child's age and maturity level, the nature of the problem. It's not about blindly following rules, but making the wisest choice in that particular moment.
It sounds like phronesis is a bit like what we might call emotional intelligence today.
Uh-huh.
It's about being attuned to both the rational and emotional aspects of a situation.
There's definitely a connection there. Aristotle believed that emotions play a role in our ethical decision-making. Phronesis involves understanding and managing our own emotions so that we can make wise choices even under pressure.
It makes me think of times when I've reacted impulsively only to regret it later.
Yeah.
If I had paused to consider things more thoughtfully, maybe I would have made a different choice.
Aristotle would say that those moments of reflection are crucial for developing phronesis. It's about taking the time to step back, consider different perspectives, and weigh the potential consequences of our actions.
This is making me realize that maybe we don't talk about phronesis enough. In our modern world, we tend to prize quick thinking efficiency.
Right.
But taking the time to cultivate practical wisdom seems even more important in our complex, fast-paced society.
I agree. In a world of information overload, it's easy to get swept away by opinions and trends. Phronesis helps us ground ourselves in what truly matters to make decisions that are aligned with our values and the greater good.
So we've talked a lot about the importance of virtuous action, but the script also highlights how Aristotle sees virtue as both a means and an end.
Right.
What does that mean exactly? I thought living virtuously was how you achieve eudaimonia.
It is, but it's also an integral part of eudaimonia. Aristotle believed that living virtuously isn't just a chore you do to reach some end goal. It's actually enjoyable and fulfilling in itself.
That's a refreshing perspective. It's not about gritting your teeth and doing the right thing because you have to, but because it actually feels good.
Exactly. Think about it. If you're genuinely kind and compassionate, those actions probably bring you a sense of satisfaction and purpose. You're not just going through the motions, you're expressing your true nature.
It's like the journey is the destination, as the saying goes.
In a way, yes, it's about cultivating habits and a way of being that make you feel truly alive and aligned with your best self, and that, according to Aristotle, is a crucial part of eudaimonia.
This reminds me of something I read about intrinsic motivation, the idea that we're often most fulfilled when we're engaged in activities that we find inherently rewarding, regardless of external incentives.
That's a great connection. Aristotle would probably argue that true eudaimonia stems from aligning our actions with our intrinsic values and motivations, finding that sweet spot where duty and joy intersect.
So if you're passionate about teaching, for instance, and you find deep satisfaction in helping others learn, that's a sign you're on the right track.
It could be, especially if those activities involve expressing virtues like knowledge, patience, and generosity. It's about finding that alignment between who you are and what you do.
You know, it's fascinating how Aristotle's ideas written centuries ago can still feel so relevant today. It's like he tapped into something fundamental about human nature.
It's a testament to the enduring power of these questions about how to live a good life. We're still grappling with the same fundamental challenges, even if our world looks vastly different from ancient Greece.
But even given that, I'm curious, is there anything Aristotle might have missed or gotten wrong, given the limitations of his time and context?
That's a great question, and it's always important to consider the historical context of any philosophical work. While his core insights about virtue, happiness, and living well are timeless, some of his specific views reflect the social norms of his era.
Like his views on women and slavery, for instance.
Exactly.
Those wouldn't exactly fly in our modern world.
Exactly. We have to acknowledge those limitations while still appreciating the profound wisdom and insights that Aristotle offers.
I think it's a good reminder that even the greatest thinkers are products of their time, but even with those caveats, there's so much we can still learn from engaging with these ancient texts.
Absolutely. They challenge us to examine our assumptions, to think critically about our own values, and to strive for a more meaningful existence.
So to recap what we've covered so far, eudaimonia is about way more than just fleeting happiness. It's about living a life of purpose, virtue, and continuous growth.
It's about finding joy and fulfillment in the process of being virtuous.
And it's about using our reason and practical wisdom that phronesis to navigate the complexities of life.
We've also touched on the idea that virtue is both a means and an end, that doing good could be its own reward.
But I feel like there's even more to unpack here. What about the role of contemplation and intellectual pursuits in achieving eudaimonia? We've only briefly mentioned that so far.
You're right, we haven't fully explored that yet, and the script hints at a fascinating discussion about how contemplation contributes to a flourishing life.
I'm definitely intrigued. I guess that means we need to continue this deep dive in another episode. Welcome back to a deep dive, into Aristotle's Nicomachean ethics.
Yeah, we're picking up right where we left off, exploring this intriguing connection between contemplation and eudaimonia.
You mentioned that Aristotle places a high value on contemplation, in Book X. Why is that?
He sees it as the highest form of human activity. Remember, Aristotle, believed that humans are rational creatures by nature. So, engaging in deep thought and reflection, allows us to exercise our rational faculties to their fullest potential.
So it's not just about like relaxing and zoning out. It's
Right.
about like actively engaging with, big questions and seeking deeper understanding.
Exactly. It's about using our reason to explore fundamental truths about the universe, ourselves, and our place in the grand scheme of things.
But how does this tie back to eudaimonia? Does contemplation somehow like make us more virtuous?
It's not quite a direct cause and effect relationship, but Aristotle suggests that contemplation can contribute to eudaimonia in a few ways.
Okay, I'm listening.
First, contemplation can help us gain a deeper understanding of virtue itself. By reflecting on ethical principles and dilemmas, we can refine our moral compass and develop a more nuanced understanding of what it means to live a good life.
So it's like contemplation gives us the theoretical knowledge and wisdom to inform our virtuous actions.
Exactly, but it goes beyond just knowledge contemplation. It can also bring us a sense of peace, joy, and fulfillment in itself.
So it's not just a means to an end, it's also like an intrinsically rewarding activity.
Precisely, Aristotle believed that engaging in contemplation connects us with something greater than ourselves, something truly meaningful and lasting.
This is fascinating. It's making me rethink how I value intellectual pursuits. I often see them as separate from real life, but maybe that's a false dichotomy?
Aristotle would probably agree with you there. He saw contemplation as an essential part of a well-rounded, flourishing life.
But then he also say that virtuous action is itself a part of eudaimonia, so how do we balance the contemplative life with the active life of virtue?
That's the million-dollar question. It seems like Aristotle believes that both are essential, but he doesn't give us a clear-cut formula for how to balance them.
So it's up to each individual to find their own balance.
That seems to be the case. It probably depends on our individual personalities, circumstances, and what we find most meaningful.
This whole discussion is really prompting me to like reflect on my own priorities and how I spend my time.
That's great. Remember, Aristotle believed that eudaimonia is a lifelong pursuit. It's about constantly striving to live a better, more fulfilling life.
Well, this deep dive has certainly given me a lot to think about. Any final words of wisdom from Aristotle before we wrap up?
One key takeaway from Nicomachean ethics is that eudaimonia is not a passive state. It requires effort, intentionality, and a commitment to living in accordance with virtue and reason.
And don't forget the importance of contemplation. Engaging in deep thought and reflection can enrich our understanding of the world and ourselves, and ultimately contribute to a more flourishing life.
Absolutely. And here's a final thought to leave you with something that wasn't explicitly mentioned in our source material. Aristotle believed that true eudaimonia is not something we achieve in isolation. It's something we cultivate in community with others.
That's a beautiful point. Our relationships and connections with others play a vital role in our overall well-being and sense of purpose.
Exactly. So as you continue your journey toward eudaimonia, remember to nurture your relationships and contribute to the well-being of your community.
What a fantastic way to end our deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of Aristotle's Nicomachean ethics. We hope it's inspired you to reflect on our own pursuit of a good life. Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep striving for eudaimonia.